Eric Duncan with Beta Phi Lambda chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And today we're hosting our Mega Genesis Career Day Fair, although virtual this year due to the pandemic. Today we have Clint Lowry, a Georgia Power engineer. So to start things off, Mr. Lowry, what college did you graduate from?
Well, first thing, Mr. Duncan, thank you for having me on the Zoom call. I appreciate it. And I graduated from North Carolina, A&T State University in electrical engineering a long time ago.
Okay. Now, how long have you been working in your profession?
So I have been in the engineering profession since 1987. That's when I graduated from A&T. I was a co-op student when I was at school. So I worked at different companies when I was in college, but I've been been with Georgia Power Company for approximately 32 years-ish. So, but it's been good. I've learned a lot. I like solving problems, but been in this profession for a long time.
Okay. Now I notice you mentioned co-op, which means cooperative education. So how did you get engaged into the co-op program when you were at North Carolina A&T?
So this is a great question, Mr. Duncan. When I went to college, I didn't have any money, not a lot of money for school. So at A&T, we had a co-op education department. That's what they did, find jobs for students to work a semester and then go to school a semester. And I applied there. So at different colleges, they'll have a department for co-op positions. And I highly recommend that. What it did for me, it gave me a lot of experience in engineering, because at the time when I was in college, you're an engineering major, but you didn't quite know what they did for a living. So that was good to get that kind of experience. And also you earn money to help pay for your education. So I highly recommend that. Most colleges have a co-op department on campus, and I would definitely tell students to investigate that.
Okay. So it sounds like you working in the co-op program enhanced your chance of getting a job once you graduate.
Absolutely. So there's pros and cons. The pro is what I said earlier. You get a lot of experience. You get to see things, you get to do things. This could be a con to some. It delays your graduation. However, when you get to the level to graduate from college, a lot of companies are looking for experience. So if you're a co-op student, you can always put that on your resume and say, hey, listen, I worked 2 years. In my case, I worked almost 2.5 years for General Motors. And so when it was time to look for a job after graduation, a lot of companies, they were attractive to the fact that I had experience working for a corporation. So they didn't necessarily have to train me of how to be an engineer for a corporation. I already had that experience.
Okay, great. Tell me briefly about your last or your different jobs that you had in your career.
Okay. So again, I've been with Georgia Power for 32 years, but when I started with the company, I started at our nuclear facility. It's a generating plant. And we generate power using nuclear fuel. And I worked there for 12 years. And I worked in the engineering department. I was a system engineer for that for part of my career at our plant. And then the rest of that period, I worked in maintenance. And I worked, had electricians and mechanics and instrument and control technicians working for me and with me to maintain the plant. So I got a lot of good experience and a lot of good hands-on engineering experiences working at that plant. And then after I left the plant, I started working in our company, our section of the company called Distribution Engineering, which requires you to handle power issues and have design power layouts for customers who's going to receive our power and use it for subdivisions or shopping centers or anybody that's building anything that need our power. So I did that for a while. And over the last 20 years, I've been in, it's called the Enhanced Power Quality Department. Power Quality is a department where we physically go to other customer sites and help these customers. If they think the problem is coming from our company, we do diagnostics to find out if that's true or not. If it is, we work on fixing those problems. And if it isn't our issue, then we work with the customers to help fix the problems inside the facility. So that's kind of my career with the Georgia Power Company.
Okay. Tell me what you like best about your job and what you least like about your job.
The best part about my job is I really enjoy solving power problems and learning about power problems and how to solve them. So the great thing about my job is most of the time, the problems are not exactly the same. There's something different about them. The facility is different. You get to see behind the scenes of how people or how companies make their product. So trying to figure out what the problems are and solving them is the greatest thing about my job. The thing that is not so great, sometimes we have to do a lot of an administrative paperwork. Writing reports of finding power problems is not really that bad. We can handle that. That's not a biggie. Most engineers are going to tell you the administrative paperwork that has nothing to do with actually solving problems is not the most enjoyable thing that we like to do. We do them because we got to do our time sheets and expenses, but that's probably the part that we enjoy the least.
Okay. If you could give advice to a student who's thinking about majoring in engineering in college, what would your advice be to them?
So the first thing I would advise them to find someone who is in the profession and talk to them in detail, not for 5 or 10 minutes, for a week, and ask as many questions as possible, no matter how basic you think it is. Because if choosing a profession is part of you, some professions you do a job, but some professions it's part of your makeup. And if you want to go down the engineering road, it's a commitment. And anytime you decide to make a commitment or thinking about making a commitment, you need to do your research. So number one, talk to someone who works in the field of engineering. You go through your guidance counselors. There's plenty of people to talk to. And the great thing about it, 90% of them will love to tell you what they do. If you are able to do it, and I know we're in a pandemic now, but if you're able to do it, follow an engineer and see what he or she does for a living. That kind of give you insight if this is really what you want to do. So those are the two things you want to do. And of course, number 3, research online. But number 1 and number 2, to me, is way more important than number 3, researching online. That way you can get a feel of the person you're talking to. Do they enjoy their job? You can watch what they do if they're able to allow you to do that. So those are my advice if you're thinking about going down the engineering road.
Okay. Now, I know a lot of our students are going to want to know the big question. What's the salary range of an engineer? So
in the engineering profession, the salary range is really wide. And there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of reasons. There are so many different disciplines of engineering. So you got electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, instrument control engineers, nuclear engineers, aeronautical engineers, petroleum engineers. So there's a lot of different chemical engineers. There's a lot of different engineering disciplines. And the salary range varies based on where you get a job, what part of the country, what part of the world. Are you working for a company? Are you a contractor? So it can literally range from $60,000 a year to $150,000 to $200,000 a year, depending on what you do, what your discipline is, where you're working in the world, what are you doing. So, and if you think about it, that's good, because what you want is you want choices. So you want to pick a profession where you can choose. Do you want to, what we call, chase the money? And there's pros and cons to do that, or get experience and gradually increase your salary. There's pros and cons with that. So engineering, the salary range is wide, but that's a good thing. And as you are going down that road of engineering, you'll find what you're majoring in as far as the discipline. You'll see the salary range gets more in tune of what you're thinking about going into.
Okay. So, Mr. Lowry, what are some skills that would help a student be successful in engineering?
So, Mr. Duncan, this is a great question. In engineering, it's math and science, of course. That's the basics of engineering. But it's also reading and writing. That's part of being an engineer. So those 4 skills, you don't have to be the expert, but you should be able to do them. Being able to communicate and work with a team is probably one of the most important things that you can do being an engineer that we don't talk about. When you're working in engineering, you deal with a lot of people, and you have to figure out what the problems are. You have to explain those problems to people. Sometimes people, they don't have any background in any engineering, so you have to be able to explain it to them so they can understand what you're doing. And then you'll deal with people who are really highly technical when it comes to engineering, and then you have to talk to them differently. So of course, your math and science, that's the most important as far as the basics. But the thing that I would emphasize, the communication and team, being able to work in a team, is very, very important in engineering.
Okay, Mr. Lowry. For the audience, Mr. Lowry and I, we work together. So
correct.
I know that Mr. Lowry attended University of Cincinnati, I think for a year, and then graduated.
Yeah, for a summer.
For a summer.
Yep, for one summer. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask you a question that was posed to me by my daughter.
Okay.
How did you determine whether to go to a predominantly white institution versus a HBCU?
Okay. So when I was coming out of high school years and years ago, I was still trying to figure out what college I wanted to go to. I knew I wanted to go and major in engineering, but I didn't quite know what college I wanted to go to. So I am from Cincinnati, and I had the opportunity to start college early. So I started at the University of Cincinnati right after high school for a summer. And while I was there, it didn't feel right for me. And the only way I can explain it is it didn't feel like I felt like a number. I didn't feel that it was a family atmosphere for me. Then I had a chance to go to North Carolina A&T, State University in Greensboro, North Carolina, that fall. So when I got there that fall, I was there on campus for a day, and it felt like it was home, and it was a family atmosphere for me. And the thing that I as I look back on it, when I was at University of Cincinnati, there was a lot of variables. You know, you're young, you're 18, you're still trying to figure out yourself. You're trying to figure out the subject matter, which is engineering, which is a very difficult subject, or it can be. And then you got to deal with your peers and other students that you're with. When I got to A&T, 95% of the students there looked like me. And what that did for me is that was one aspect I didn't have to figure out. I didn't have to understand other, because I knew this, because this group looked like me. So all I had to do from my point of view is understand the subject matter that I was majoring in. And also for me, when I was at A&T, it was an instant family. It seemed that we were there to help each other get through school. And even though I'm sure there was competition, but the competition didn't feel to be that I want to get ahead and I want to leave you behind. It was more like we all can get ahead together. And that's my view of the different colleges. Now, I also will say that it depends on what kind of person you are and your background. But for me, going to an HBCU, and he just got back. So he was frozen for a second, but he's back. So I don't know if you captured all that, but.
Yes, I got the majority of it. It sounded like you knew early on that you needed support to reach your goals. And it sounds like North Carolina A&T provided that support for you.
Yeah, and again, this is an individual, this is called knowing thyself. So, Mr. Doug, you're right. So when I was coming through college, leaving high school, you got a lot of uncertainties. And everybody does, that's normal. And sometimes when you go to a bigger institution, because University of Cincinnati is a huge college, it doesn't feel like a family atmosphere. Where when I went to A&T, which is probably half the size at that time, at University of Cincinnati, the support was automatic. It was there by the other students. It was there by the faculty members and the counselors. And not saying that University of Cincinnati didn't have that, but it was really, it was very evident to me when I got to campus that this is the goal. There was no doubt what the goal was to get for you to be successful at this institution. Now, we can talk about the differences. It's a lot of differences, but when you look at it overall, first thing I would tell students is, what kind of person are you? And at that time, for me, that support was important for me.
Okay, that's great insight, Mr. Lowry. We have reached the end of our interview, Mr. Lowry. This was some great information. I will make sure that if some students want to contact you for more in-depth questions, we'll provide them your information. And on behalf of the Mega Genesis Committee, I want to thank you for allowing us to have you on today to just educate our students. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. Thank you, students, for listening. And remember, never give up.